Welcome to the NICU Today podcast, a podcast to give families a new point of support as they navigate the NICU journey. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast and share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. Welcome back to the NICU Today podcast. We are excited to welcome one of our favorite guests. Joining us again today, Dr. Stefanie Lopacinski is a licensed clinical social worker with nearly 20 years of experience providing individual, couples, and group therapy. Dr. Lopacinski has worked with various populations and patients of all ages and backgrounds. She is the owner of her own practice, Women's Wellness of Abington. She takes pride in specializing in treating female patients who are seeking out support throughout their journey of reproductive, perinatal, and postpartum life changes. Dr. Lopacinski is here today to talk about navigating the NICU during the holidays, which is always a challenging time. Be sure to also check out Dr. Lopacinski's previous Today is a Good Day podcast episodes, Choosing a Therapist That Fits, and one of my favorites, Sorry Not Sorry, Putting Your Baby First. Welcome back to the NICU Today podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is number 3.
I know. We get to talk about lots of different topics, my friend. So we have a lot to cover today. Let's jump right in. You know, Paul and I were in the NICU over the holidays, both Thanksgiving and the Christmas season. It was difficult. It was really a challenging time. What do you tell families who are in the NICU over the holidays and missing their baby's first holiday at home?
Yeah. When I used to round at the NICU, I used to go up to just any couple and introduce myself, and they would say something about the baby, and I would say, "No, I'm here about you." And so, what I would recommend saying to these families is that this holiday is going to be different, but that's okay. Right. And just that alone allows them to sigh a little bit and just realize, yeah, this is going to be different. Right. It's a holiday during the NICU stay, but I can still do certain things to honor this holiday and honor these traditions that happen in the family. But yeah, it's going to look really different, but we have people to support you this year.
And what are some of the things that you might tell families to do? I mean, obviously, all different families, different backgrounds celebrate different holidays, but any recommendations of things you could do while your baby's in the NICU?
Yeah, there's tons. So definitely recommend taking advantage of any books, like holiday themed books that the doctors have available or the nurses hand out. Those are lovely, and it can really be a keepsake that you can have to remind you that you did have a holiday with your baby. And you can take a Sharpie and write a little love note and say, next year will be different. And taking advantage of those holiday blankets or those little outfits, like whether it be a turkey leg, hat that they give. I think they give some of those, or, Santa outfits or whatever it may be, just to kind of take that and use it as your holiday themes. And you can use it for the following years too, and put it around, and it just reminds you how resilient your family has been.
Well, and I do think it can be challenging as well. Just thinking back on our own experience, my parents were with us that first Thanksgiving. Our daughter Mary was really becoming very ill right around Thanksgiving. She passed the Sunday after Thanksgiving back in 2010. But I remember going into the NICU and trying to find the balance of making sure I was spending time there, but also taking some time I was continuing to heal personally from delivering the girls via C-section. But any recommendations for families of that piece, taking some time for yourself that day in addition to spending the time in the NICU?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were to go with, I'm going to go 2 different ways with this. So individually and as a couple, if you do have a partner. So individually, you can say to your partner, you know what, I'm going to go across the street to the Mexican restaurant. I need a little bit of like me time, or, a friend's going to meet me there, or get a massage, right? To honor your body that just birthed your baby, right? I always say your baby's birthday is also your birthday,
Love that.
right? And to honor that, because and I tell my kids all the time, that's my day too. That's the day I gave birth, right? So really honoring that for yourself and maybe doing something that feels good emotionally, some good food, something good for your body, getting that massage, something, right? As a couple, I think it would be a great idea to, now that we have things like Uber Eats and whatever else you may use, you can get any meal you want from, say you get like a turkey dinner from Whole Foods that can be catered to you. You can get it in a bag and set it up at the table in the cafeteria, and then you have your meal that you're used to, right? So kind of getting creative in that space.
I want to talk to you as well. Oftentimes, if you're in the NICU during the holidays, it's depending how early your baby was, how many days you've been there, you might kind of be quarantining yourself just because of germs and having to go into
Yeah.
the hospital. But you have a lot of family members who are reaching out, text messages, Facebook messages, phone calls. Those messages can be just incredibly
Mhm.
overwhelming, and especially around the holiday season when you have that extra emotional weight of being in the NICU, not being able to be home with your family or even with your immediate family. What advice do you have for families to kinda navigate through those messages and manage all of those emotions dealing with all of that outreach from so many people?
So I love this question because in many situations regarding our children, I recommend having a spokesperson. And this spokesperson can relay all this information to all the families or all the office colleagues that you have, or friends, or whatever that may look like, right? And that takes the job off of you. You don't want that job. You're not a secretary in the NICU, right? It's too much. Before there were phones, right? Me and Martha, we remember when there was no phones, right?
Yes.
Um, people wouldn't be able to reach us, right? And I'm not saying that's a good thing, right? Because that really is unfortunate. But there wasn't that demand from other people, right? So when we get that demand of question over question, we're just looking at our phone, hearing those notifications and like picking up. And then you're like, where has the time gone? Right. And I'm ruminating almost, right? Like, so ruminating in the mind is going over something over and over, but it's kind of like a text rumination, right? So get a spokesperson and decide who that's going to be, and decide who can know, right, from that spokesperson. It could be pictures, it could be updates, it could be, updates on yourself, because, guess what? You're still a person, right? So it could be those wonderful updates, right? And only if it's going to be supportive, if those people are going to be supportive, right? You want a good spokesperson. You can also silence notifications. You can put your phone in airplane mode, so you're not constantly blowing up. You can turn your phone off. Oh my gosh, you can actually take your phone off, right? That works. And charge your phone, right? It's okay, and it actually feels really, really nice. Martha, have you experienced that, like, when your phone's off and it's just like
Yes.
nobody?
Or not with you. Yes, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially if like everyone's in your house that like you need to have. So yeah, turn your phone off. It's a thing. The other thing I recommend is putting your phone, like I said, in airplane mode, but you can also just say there's no service in the NICU.
That's
Sorry,
good.
I didn't get your message. The service here really sucks. I think it's because, it's in the back of the hospital, and it's just like, sorry, not sorry, right, Martha?
Sorry, not sorry. That's right.
Exactly. Episode 1. So, just put it out there, and who's gonna fight that? Who's gonna say, well, the hospital needs better Wi-Fi? It's just what it is, right? And I also wanted to say that your partner and you also might have a different spokesperson, right? And that's okay. So you may not really want his whomever to, know updates from you directly, but maybe, he wants to, right? Or your partner wants to. So allow each other to have that spokesperson for your own thing, right? Because he or she needs to worry about their work colleagues and you worry about yours. And that way it's not so messy.
Well, what I hear you saying too is that you're really in control of the messaging that goes out, and we've talked about this on previous podcast episodes. Some may have a spokesperson, and we've also talked about websites like Caring Bridge, where when someone reaches out, you say, "Guess what? We're providing all updates through this channel. You are welcome to go subscribe, and you will get updates when we decide that we're providing those updates." So there are a lot of different
Right.
websites and different opportunities out there. We used Caring Bridge. It was great. We could upload pictures that we wanted to. We could share whatever we wanted to about Claire and Mary. And then Claire, after Mary passed away, but some have used Facebooks in private groups where they've invited their family or close friends to join that, and you get to control the messaging that you want to give out. But just like Dr. Lopacinski is saying, you get to control the message, and that's what's important. You do not have to give up that power and that control, because it is your story and it is what you are going through with your baby or babies in the NICU. Now, some family members might also ask about visiting, and that can be really challenging, and I know rules have changed since COVID. Um, or some have asked about doing FaceTime in the NICU. If you're not ready for that, how do you
Mhm.
kind of stay in control of that as well?
Yeah, visiting is a biggie, right? And even pre-COVID, and not that we're really we're post-COVID sort of, but it's okay to say that we're not having visitors, or better yet, the hospital is not having visitors. No one's going to be calling the hospital and saying, are there visitors allowed in the NICU, right? They're not going to talk to that person, even if they call. And I'm saying this because very anxious moms will say this to me. Well, they could call, right? So I'm trying to put out there what I hear often to negate that like concern from parents from the get-go, right? So they're not going to call, they're not going to get information anyway. Okay, so your worst case scenario happens, and mask wearing might happen if they are allowed to visit and if you want them to visit. There is also, as you know, like a very particular scrub in procedure, right? And they have to do that, and they have to have no jewelry on, and their phone has to be in a bag, and there's many things that maybe that they're not aware of, right? That like, Aunt Edna might not want to take off her emerald ring, right? But guess what, Edna, you're gonna have to.
Mhm. And do you I always remember, just adding on to this, I remember the NICU nurses and the neonatologists also saying, "Oh, you can just blame us. You just throw us under the bus. Just say, we're not allowing it, or, use us as much as you need to," which was always really helpful. Families also have, and again, we're talking about the holidays. This is an added joyful, stressful, bittersweet,
Mhm.
all different types of emotions for many of us
Yeah.
during the holiday season. Families who are in the NICU also may have older children at home.
Mhm.
And that is a whole other chapter to navigate as you're trying to go through the NICU, and you're going through the holiday season. It can feel impossible. I did not personally experience that, but many of our friends have experienced that.
Mhm.
What do you say to children?
Yeah. So it depends on the age group, right? If they're younger children, I recommend letting them know that you're bringing home the baby when the baby is its strongest, right? And you can make gestures like, baby needs to get strong, strong like you, and maybe show a picture of them when they were a baby and say, you were ready to come home, right? And our other baby is not quite as strong as you were, but we're going to get them as strong as possible, right? So kind of have them in the process, right? Another idea for them to almost, get excited about you going to the NICU without them if needed is bringing something back, like a little token of, love. And it could be, oh, this is like the size of the diaper, obviously a new diaper, right? That has been used, but then the older will not be happy, right? But you want maybe a little cute diaper, right? I know my girls are obsessed with those little diapers at the peds office, right? They're like, oh my god, they're so tiny. So bringing that home, also bringing home a little, like maybe a balloon from the gift shop, maybe some candy, right? So you know where I'm going with this. The association becomes like, oh, there's a little highlight when mom or dad or whoever gets home, right? And they make that connection because they're small, right? But they know that they're looking forward to it. So another thing that I recommend is maybe like a coloring page that you can bring back from the baby, right? And it could be obviously a little line or something, or whatever you feel is appropriate. But it could be, or a book, right? You can bring a book back and say, um, baby Chelsea wanted to give this to you, right? And that back and forth is really lovely. And they can also send stuff with you to take to the NICU, and that really helps because that involvement is there, and they're going to be more connected when the baby gets home, right?
That's great.
Yep. For the older ones, I recommend sharing as much as you can, right? My girls, from a very young age, they knew, different body parts by like their full name. Like sometimes they know more than like adult women do about things. They love to say, "Oh, mommy, when I was in your uterus, did I?" They're very educated, and so I think it's really good to educate our girls, especially, but educate our older ones and just say, what kind of happened, right? It's okay to say a name to something, right? Name to the disorder, right? And maybe they'll even look up about it, which is kind of a lovely thing that a child would do that, right, and find out more. So the more information, the better, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is that open conversation. We had a lot of that in our home when our son William, when I was pregnant with him, he had trisomy 18. We had a lot of in-depth conversations with our two daughters who were at the time 3 and 7 about what William would look like when he was born, and he wouldn't look the way that Martha Rose looked, or just all of those conversations, looking up about trisomy 18, what that meant, and, making all those memories. But it is open communication is so important.
It
Yeah,
is.
for sure. All right. So we talked about being in the hospital over the holidays, in the NICU, going back and forth, how to navigate some difficult conversations. But let's say the baby comes home around the holiday season, and your family goes, "Great, you're home. Good. You can bring everybody over. We're doing a big dinner. We're having a big Thanksgiving dinner. I'm sure you're going to come now, right?" And you go, "Oh, I don't think so. We are not quite ready for that." What do you do?
Yeah. Well, back to what I was saying, and I think sorry, not sorry, and what you just said a few minutes ago, throw that doctor under the bus, throw that hospital under the bus, and I like to even say like, hey, to my patients, like, hey, you can say like the doctor said da 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 da, meaning like me, right? Because I have a doctorate. So it's like, hey, just say the doctor said, and like no one says like what doctor, what unit. So that works really well. I think that's the only reason why I got my doctorate, to be honest.
Well, you're so funny. It's so important though, is your ownership, because and we've talked about this, but it's such an important time of year. And I think it's important to say again, at the end of the day, if your baby gets sick, you are the one in the hospital with your baby in the ER, at the, back in the pediatric unit. If your baby gets sick, you are the one that's bedside. It is not the aunt or uncle or grandparents who wanted you to come
Right.
to the holiday dinner because that was so important, or the Thanksgiving meal because that was so important. And that's okay for you to be selfish right now to say, you know what? Our baby really can't be around that many people, especially in RSV season with the respiratory virus or cold and flu season and all of
Right,
those different components. It's really important, at least for this year,
right.
that we will be staying home with our baby. We're happy to FaceTime everybody. If you want to set up a Zoom call, we could say hi to everybody for a few minutes if you want to do that. But for this year, we need to stay home for the health of the baby, right?
Right. Yeah. And my I have a strong belief in the power of language. And so you said a word and I like was set on it. And I said, as soon as Martha stops talking, I'm gonna
Ah,
mention. But I tell my patients this all the time. The word selfish, right? I'm not a fan of that word selfish because usually it's what people are saying when they feel uncomfortable putting their needs first, right, as a priority. So I actually like to say, no, you're not being selfish. You're actually being self-full, right? You're
oh, I
putting,
love that.
thank you. You're actually putting yourself, right? And, making it full and making it about you and your family. So it's not selfish at all. And I'm not picking on your words here, Martha,
I love it. I'm gonna start using that instead.
because I tell this to everyone. But the other thing I wanted to mention about that, oh, if you say a word like that, what it does is it gives permission to people, that green light to go like, yeah, they are being selfish, right? And kind of laser in on that. So we don't want any words like that. We don't want sorry. We don't want just. We'll be happy to, that we state what we're going to do, right? And that will be very different from next year. One of my statements that I really like for parents to use is, I know this is so frustrating, and I appreciate that you care so much for the baby and that you understand how hard this is for us. That's it. And there's no question there. It's just a
Mhm.
statement, right? But it's also giving them a compliment, right? And it's, and it makes you feel like, oh yeah, I am being understanding, right? So it takes a rough person to kind of like kind of really attack that. But people with emotional intelligence, like a healthy amount of it, or empathy, are not going to say anything about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Love
Especially when you say the doctor, right? And this poor doctor has like all these like, like tread marks all over their body, but they have good insurance, so don't worry about it, about throwing them over the bus. So all good.
Well, I feel like we tackled so many different great topics today, but just overall, what other advice do you have for families who are navigating the NICU this holiday season?
Yeah. Well, I think we live in such a digital world, right? We talked about the texting, but I also wanted to touch up on social media, right? So you had mentioned about the Facebook private group. That's a wonderful idea. What I want to go into is all about this irrational guilt regarding things like social media or the holiday, right? So, what I mean by that is I hear families all the time saying, well, I feel bad for posting, but I also feel bad for not posting because if I don't post it, does that mean I'm not proud of my baby? Right. But if I post it and someone says something like, I want to go flip mode, right? And it's like, I get that. So what I say is to really like, think about why you're posting, right? You don't need to post.
Mhm.
After I had two losses and I had my Leah afterwards, my rainbow baby, I didn't post that I had a baby till she was 1 years old. It just I just didn't want to. It just didn't feel right. So it's up to you what you want to post and what you don't, but it does not mean that you're proud, you're too proud, or you're not proud enough, because we can really get on ourselves about that, and it's not worth it. The other thing is like the scrolling. You're gonna see family after family in like matching pajamas, eating turkey, and all those things that are quite triggering because your baby is not home through the holidays, right? So I feel like that will trigger you, no matter who it is. It could be your sister, right? And your nieces. And then you feel bad. You're like, oh my God, why am I not happy right now? Does that mean I'm a bad aunt? It's like, no, it doesn't. It just means that you are hurting because you don't have that, right? You're not beating up on anyone. So it's all about irrational guilt. It's like a double negative, right? That term, because guilt is just the most worthless emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? I always say, Martha, like, feel guilty if you punch somebody in the face, right? But otherwise, we don't need to feel guilty about these decisions that we make
Yes.
when we're being self-full.
Self-full. I love that. I love that. Where
Yeah.
can our listeners learn about your practice?
So my practice name is Women's Wellness of Abington, and you can go on my website, which is womenswellnessofabington.com. It's a little long. Maybe I could shorten it a little bit in the future. Um, yeah. And you know what? I'm putting this out here because like I'm putting the pressure on me, but I am in the process of writing a book, and I do plan to write another book after that one. So I'm putting the pressure on myself by saying it in like, in the world, in public. But I am working on that too, which I'm really excited about. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
Congratulations. Well, I can't thank you enough, Dr. Stefanie Lopacinski, for coming back on the NICU Today podcast. We covered a lot of good topics today that are incredibly relevant over the holiday season. So just want to thank you again for being with us, and thanks for all the great advice.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Be selfful today.
Thank you for tuning in to the NICU Today podcast, brought to you by Today is a Good Day. Learn more at todayisagoodday.org.